Just one more hour until reinforcements, aka me, arrive to save the day. But until then, keep your eyes on the highway and keep on trucking with Jimmy Mack on Road Gang Radio, y'all.
Soaping windows, egging houses, TPing trees, the good old days. That's the word from Trucker Bosun. And we're also out there telling Tara, the turtle, touchdown Garris, good morning. She's on the chat. This is me once again reminding you that you can find all of this over on your favorite podcast platform as well, usually about 24 hours after the fact. Every single Tech Talk with TMC exists on Spotify and every single streaming platform that you guys enjoy. In the case of Spotify, which is what Dave and I's preferred, situational thing is, we essentially, when it comes to a new edition of Tech Talk, I set it up so that I go over there. I put in Tech Talk with TMC on Spotify. It comes up immediately. You can follow it, hit the notification button, and in doing that, in case you miss any of these, you can hear them all. They are all there from the moment Robert started here on this new platform till this current day. Every single Tech Talk with TMC is available to enjoy in case you've missed any. So much of this content is evergreen. Even though the leaves are changing colors right now, so much of this stuff is re-listenable to. In case you missed anything, always make a habit of putting this in your notifications because you want to never miss Tech Talk with TMC. It's getting to spooky season as Robert Braswell, the executive director of the ATA's Technology and Maintenance Council, once again joins us. Happiest of seasons to you.
Well, thanks, Jimmy Mack. It sounds like from the introduction, you're using embalming fluid to encapsulate our Tech Talk with TMCs for posterity.
Oh,
I guess
nicely
that's
done.
It's appropriate for Halloween, so, Phantasm and all that. Really.
Absolutely, brother. So you actually, boy, you really hit the ball out the park with this particular topic. I want you to kind of unpack that. I know you got your bureaucracy as well to kind of go through. You brought a great guest. It's a great conversation, so I will turn it over to you, my spooky friend.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And this week, you're right, we're pleased to welcome back to the program Todd Cotier, who's a past general chairman and treasurer of TMC. That's our highest volunteer position at the council. He's also, more importantly, a fleet management expert with more than 45 years of experience in the industry. And what with it being Halloween week, today we're going to talk about scary things to avoid in vehicle maintenance. But before we get started, as you know, each week we like to make a special offer available to our listeners. This week, once again, it's our TMC Preventive Maintenance Inspection Manual for technicians. Nothing scarier than not having a good PM truck on the road. We're offering it for the special price of just $25 plus shipping and handling. You can get it by calling our customer service line toll-free at 1-866-821-3468. Just ask for item T0450, mention the radio program and Radio Nemo, and you can get it for that special price. Also, if you're an owner-operator or a small fleet with 100 or fewer power units, we'd love to have you join the Technology and Maintenance Council. You can do it for the discounted annual dues of just $150 today. For this, you're going to get our 2-volume recommended practices manual. That's over 4,000 pages of information on the care and feeding, repair, maintenance, and specification of commercial vehicles, all in digital format, and many other good benefits come with that too. So please call the same toll-free number if you're interested in signing up. And as for the bureaucracy, we always remind our listeners that any recommended practices we discuss on the program reflect the consensus of our members. We offer them as recommendations only, and everyone must first determine for themselves if they are safe and appropriate for their operation. Please remember that TMC doesn't endorse any product, person, or service, and the opinions expressed in the show are those of the individual and not necessarily the opinion of his or her company, nor TMC, unless stated otherwise. And with all that out of the way, please welcome to the program the not-so-scary Todd Cotier. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Robert.
So we have a lot of things. It's almost Halloween, and that's why we're going to be unpacking, the top 10 scariest things to avoid in vehicle maintenance. And, you having almost 50 years of experience in this industry, you must have seen a whole lot of scary things happen, haven't you?
I have seen a lot of scary things. I guess one of the biggest things for me is not performing a pre-trip inspection. And I don't mean performing a poor inspection. I'm talking about just hooking up your trailer and start grabbing some gears and putting it in the wind. It's the scariest thing I could think of, that you don't know what condition your equipment it is while you're driving down the road.
Now, just for context for the listening audience, Todd is a phenomenal expert when it comes to vehicle inspection. He can take a vehicle right off the assembly line, take a look at it, and find at least 20 things wrong with it. I'm not kidding. And he prides himself in that. And that's very interesting. He tells some really great stories, some of which you probably can't share on the air. Maybe somebody can. But this being number one makes no surprise to me, and it's near and dear to his heart. In fact, Todd, maybe you can talk a little bit about it at a TMC meeting a few years ago. We actually had a little contest at the Technology and Maintenance Council's annual meeting where we had people on the show floor try to see if they could spot the things that we bugged on the truck that you had identified and based on prior experience in doing vehicle inspections.
Right, either we bugged or found wrong. I think we found over 32 items. So fleet managers and maintenance VPs of maintenance and directors of maintenance, they all had their chance to analyze that vehicle. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the most defects found were 10 or 12 out of 32.
Yeah, that's right. And, not to name names or anything like that, but it was basically a brand new vehicle just put into service. I remember one of our members was very proud of that truck, had it all nice and pretty, and you found 32 different things, not all of them being out of service or anything like that, but things that could be a problem. Like, for example, seeing wires tied together with zip ties or something like that, right?
Yeah, or pulled too tight or not tight enough or chafing. Yeah, you just have to, when I inspect a vehicle, I don't look at it for what is there at the moment. I'm looking at a year down the road or even 2 years down the road, what is going to be a problem. And chafing airlines are typically warranted for, I think, 3 months on any new vehicle. And but they're going to put you out of service in 6 or 8 months if you don't address them early on. So it's amazing when you look what you actually find.
Yes, not just what's going to put you out of service today, but you got to think down the road what's going to be a problem today, tomorrow, to next week, next month. If you really want to be serious about saving money and operating safely, that's how you got to view it, right? Take the long view of when you're doing the inspection.
Well, it's called preventative maintenance for a reason.
That's right. It is. That's exactly right. Let's move on to another topic. Let's talk a little bit about fifth wheel release handles.
Okay, so this is extremely scary, and in my tenure and what I did for work, I saw this happen more often than I'd like to talk about. But not inspecting the fifth wheel release handle to ensure that it's locked in. So I'm not a fan of backing under a trailer, listening for what you think is the fifth wheel jaws closing around the kingpin, hooking up the airline's light cord, cranking the landing gear, grabbing some gears, and heading down the road. As a professional driver, it is your responsibility to ensure that the jaws are closed around the kingpin and that the fifth wheel release handle is pushed all the way in or in the locked position. Robert, I don't know if you know this, but I think all fifth wheels sold in the United States, the release handle is also encompassed with the secondary lock. So if the handle's not all the way in, you are not safe to move. You need to figure out what's going on there.
It is true that each one of the fifth wheel setups are a little bit different in terms of what they look like when it's locked, when it's released. There's a little variation between manufacturers, and if you're going between just one type of equipment, you get used to one type of fifth wheel. But if you're going between different types of vehicles, different brands, manufacturers, you really need to be aware of the differences between them, right?
Oh, for sure. And it's kind of amazing. Every driver that we've had drop a trailer, either loaded or empty, they all swear that they did a tug test, they did this, they did that, and you look at the fifth wheel and the handle's not all the way in. It's like you were never coupled. We could have the discussion all day long, but the proof is right in front of us.
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. And, the tug test can fool you if you're not really careful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've watched drivers do it before. They sit right there and watch them do it and drop the trailer. They go to, they pull out of their parking spots, turn to the left or the right, and the trailer keeps going straight.
Absolutely. But let's move on to another scary topic. What about leaking glad hand seals?
Yeah, so leaking glad hand seals, this is very scary. The seal costs less than $1, but is responsible for a lot of out-of-service violations and negative CSA maintenance points. So here's a little trick. So when you inspect, because you're going to hook up your trailer or whatever, and you're going to inspect both of your glide hands on the truck and the trailer, and if you find a cracked or torn glide hand seal, just take your key from your truck. You can dig that seal out, flip it over, and you're going to say, well, one side of the seal is bigger than the other. It won't fit. Trust me, it will fit. And you have a perfectly good seal then. Unless it's been flipped already, which the chances are it probably hasn't been. And then, your problem's solved. You didn't spend anything. You took 2 seconds or 2 minutes to flip that over, and it works.
That's assuming that the seal doesn't have a slice in it or something like that. But if it's just from normal wear, from hook up and disconnect repeatedly, that's gonna work for you, because the other side, it's kind of like flipping the board on your deck, right? The deck is worn on one side, you flip the board over, it looks good.
But yeah, the other side's been protected inside of the glide hand, so in theory, unless it's full of corrosion or something, there's no damage to it. And everybody says like one side of the glide hand seal is typically wider than the other. It will fit. That's a real thin lip on that wide side, and you can make that fit inside of that groove that seal sets in. Will it help to put a little grease or something like that on it to get it in there? Or should you avoid that because of deterioration? I mean, you might have to take your key and dig out some of the corrosion if you have that's true. Aluminum glide hand that has some corrosion buildup in it. The white cake built up, sure, yeah. Yeah. But it's a good idea to get that out of there anyway, because that corrosion is going to eat into the backside of that seal anyhow, right? It's going to probably make more trouble than it's worth. So it's a good idea to clean it before you do that. Yeah. But nice tip, just go ahead and flip the seal. You got these, basically you have a free seal there. You didn't even know it. Yeah, one of the things we did at the fleet I worked at, we always had a bucket of those at the service writer's counter. And just help yourself, just like a bowl of candy, right? Just help yourself to take 2 or 3, take 10 if you want. We didn't care. Little chewy, but that's okay. I'll pass. Let's move on to another topic. This is one I know is scary, and it's out of adjusted brakes. Yeah, I talk about this in all our segments that we do together, but to me, out of adjustment brakes, you can't get any scarier than this. So we would teach our drivers how to adjust your brakes. And years ago, we'd certify drivers, give them the tools, how to do that. We had a training aid. We show them how to adjust brakes, emergency brake adjustments. But now you could just do that by sitting in your cab. So you don't even have to get out of the cab. You just you build up set your parking brakes, build up the truck's air pressure to 120, could be 140, whatever your governor kickout pressure is. Depress the yellow tractor brake valve. People will say you could do both at once, which you can, but this is the way we always taught our drivers how to do it. So you depress your yellow tractor brake valve, depress the brake pedal all the way to the floor and hold it for 2 seconds. Then take your foot off the brake pedal for 2 seconds, and you want to repeat that procedure at least 10 times. You might have to do it more than 10 times if your brakes are extremely out of adjustment, but if your automatic slack adjusters are working correctly, you have just adjusted all the brakes on your tractor. And then you would pull the yellow valve back out to set the tractor parking brakes, and you'd do the same procedure again, but you would build up your air pressure again, depress your red parking brake for your trailer, and then do the same exact procedure. And we would tell our drivers every time you hook onto a new trailer or you start at your day, you should be doing this. You're sitting there anyhow. You should be checking your dash lights and checking your air horn, all the other devices in your truck, part of your pre-trip. But the other good time to do this is while you're sitting in line waiting for a DOT inspection. You should be sitting there just depressing your brakes, letting off your brakes, and making sure your brakes are in adjustment before you get inspected. So that's something we taught our drivers. It worked very well. Drivers would call in and say, I can't slide my tandems because my brakes aren't holding. We'd go through this procedure with them. They would do that, and then we wouldn't have to send a road service out to help slide trailer tandems. And it's important to note that if you've got the automatic brake adjusters, and almost everybody's got them now because they've been around, mandated since the mid-1990s, you really shouldn't have to manually adjust those things. If they're working properly, they should be doing the job. And sometimes people would manually adjust an automatic slack adjuster, and it just causes problems, right? Yeah, that's a valid point. If you're a technician and you're doing a PM or brake maintenance, whatever, and you have to adjust brakes, you need to find out what's going on there. Something's not working properly. Maybe your stroke of your maxi cam is too long, or your slack adjuster stroke is, it's not adjusted properly. There's something going on. Depending on the brand of slack adjuster, you could have, something mechanically that has failed. So yeah, if you have to manually adjust brakes on an automatic cycle adjuster, there's an issue.
The procedure you talked about reminds me of the old 1968 Pontiac Chevrolets with drum brakes. You go around the parking lot backwards and donuts for a few times, and it straightens your brakes out just fine. A little different technology there, but those star wheels will work just fine. You brought back around the parking lot. But it's good advice, though.
Yeah,
And
I remember those.
yeah, it's good. It's good advice. Let's talk about another scary item, and I think that is dealing with not having a solid PM program.
Yeah, so I prided myself on having a very, very good PM program, at least in my eyes. But so we used to call it a PML, a preventive maintenance list. So a solid PM program will reduce your total cost of ownership. My PML was always a fluid document. So I personally would analyze all our breakdowns and, all our mishaps on the road, whatever they may be. And then I'd review this list with my shop managers, what we call our point people or our lead technicians and our lead technicians. And we adjust our PM list as needed, but we'd always do this quarterly. So I found in a lot of other fleets that I would talk to that they would have a PM list and they would have that for like years and years and years, and they'd almost be afraid to adjust that. And it's like, why wouldn't you adjust that to what you're having problems with? And a lot of stuff you would pick up, excuse me, but you'd learn stuff just in the hallways at TMC meetings, like, hey, do you pressure test your radiator caps? Because, 10% of them are failing right out of the box, brand new. So we actually added that to our PM checklist, and it was amazing how many radiator caps we were having failing. So your PM should be your highest maintenance cost, as far as I'm concerned. You should spend more money on PMs. And I guess my question is your maintenance program proactive or reactive? And I can tell you from experience, it's less expensive to be proactive than it is reactive.
You're listening to Tech Talk with TMC. We have Todd Cotier here talking about scary things to avoid in vehicle maintenance. This next one, Todd, is absolutely scary. If you've ever seen this happen on the road, boy, it's just a real killer, literally. But fortunately, it's very, very rare. And this is wheel offs. Let's talk a little bit about wheel offs.
Wheel offs, excuse me, have got to be the most scariest thing on the face of the earth. Never mind if you're a maintenance director or whatever your position is. But no matter what the issue, if you have a wheel off, you have problems or something has failed. So it could be a wheel seal. You lost all your fluid in your wheel bearings, so your bearings have failed and burned up, and your wheel comes off. Wheel and hub assembly. That's bad, right? So if you installed brakes or you had the hub off or did a wheel seal or did some brake maintenance or wheel end maintenance, and you didn't torque the axle nuts correctly, and you didn't follow the proper recommended practices to adjust your wheel bearings, that could be another failure mode. Running low on oil or fluid, again, I'm thinking of a trailer hub more than anything, but a truck hub would do the same thing. And again, that would be the same failure. And either loose lug nuts or over-tightened lug nuts. So there is a torque. There are procedures to check all of those things. The TMC has RPs to encompass everything on a wheel end that you could ever dream of. And you need to get a hold of those RPs and follow those. And if you have a good, solid wheel end program, you can sleep well at night, I can tell you that.
And when the issue first raised its ugly head in the early 90s, late 80s, the National Transportation Safety Board challenged TMC to develop materials to help stem this issue, even though they recognized it was not a very common issue by any means. It was very rare, but when it did happen, it was catastrophic. And we developed the User's Guide to Wheels and Rims, RP 222, and that's been the basis for a lot of these programs ever since. So, yeah, very good advice to use that as the basis for your wheel maintenance and fastener program. Let's move on from wheel offs to air pressure, inflation pressure.
Yeah, so not having proper air pressure in your tires, either high or low, is extremely scary. So the air in your tires, what actually carries your load, right? Carries your empty truck, your loaded truck, whatever. And having proper air pressure is going to help your truck and trailer handle better, but it's also give you longevity. But tires, if you're low on air, tires typically will run hot and they'll come apart. and also, premature wear and everything else that goes with that. So tire pressure, you should always check your tire pressure cold. You should always have a good gauge that is accurate. And a tire just sitting in the sun, and like if you're in Arizona and you check your tire at night, and then you check it again at noontime, and then, the tire's just leaning against a building or something, you could actually see a 5 or 10 pound increase in pressure just because of the heat. So always adjust your tire pressure cold.
Yeah, I think it's something like for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit, it's an additional PSI of pressure. So
I believe so.
if you're going from 50 PSI to 100 PSI during the course of a load, you will notice a difference there. And of course, the tire pressure monitoring systems and all that kind of technology is really making it a lot easier to keep tabs on your tires. But having a good mechanical gauge is always recommended, because you never know when these other systems may or may not be working.
Yeah, and you have to use a gauge. You can't use a hammer or a tire thumper, or you can't kick them to, I don't think your shoe is a certified tire pressure gauge.
That's true. You can't learn anything from thumping a tire. All it can tell you is if it's completely flat. And you can pretty much tell that by looking if it's completely flat. So what's the point? Exactly. So use a proper inflation pressure gauge and or your TPMS, and you'll do right by that. This next one on your list, this one drives me crazy too, because it always seems like the pitting always happens right in front of where I'm looking.
Yeah, exactly. So crazy, but windshield pitting or sandblasting is very scary, especially oncoming headlights, or if you got some rain, you just can't see. It's like you have beer goggles on almost. So yeah, in the rain and in winter months, it's hard to see through the windshield. It's very scary for the driver. But I don't know. I think glass has changed over the years, Robert. Like, or it could be maybe. Of course, I blame everything on road de-icing chemicals for corrosion, but I don't know what's changed. Is it the road de-icing chemicals, or is it the glass itself has changed that we seem to have more pitting in windshields than we used to?
I'll have to ask around about that. We've got some people at TMC that may be able to answer that question for us. Let's move on to another topic.
The windshields too. Everything has changed so much for aerodynamics, so there could be a lot of factors to that. But
it's true. The other thing too is when the windshields were two-piece, you could change them easier. Maybe you didn't notice it as much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's move on to another one. You've got brakes thin adjustment, parking brake springs. What's that all about?
Well, so part of your pre-trip inspection, pre-trip and post-trip, you should be, or you need to be inspecting your brakes. So are your brake pads within that specification that they need to be? Are they thin, wore out, non-existing? And another issue we used to find quite often in my fleet was broken parking brake springs. So I don't know how many of our listeners have had a parking brake apart before, but there's actually a big coil spring in there. I'm going to say it's at least half-inch wire. And if you had that spring and you held that between your two hands and you tried to depress it like an accordion, I don't think you could even wiggle it. There's so much tension there.
No, it's not happening.
Arnold Schwarzenegger would probably have a hard time depressing that. That's how robust that spring is. But we used to find a lot of broken springs on our PMs. Not a lot. We find broken springs often in our PMs, I should say. But you wouldn't know until you go to slide tandems or something like that, or less, maybe a roadside inspection. Like you really had to be looking for that, and that was on our PM list again, our PML, to make sure that we took a look in there.
So is that something you can? Let's back up. Is that something you can correct through proper speccing, or maybe do something different in your maintenance? I mean, why are those springs breaking?
Well, I think it's corrosion, at least in the Northeast, and quite often you'll find there's where you could cage the parking brake. You could put the bolt in and pull that spring up to release the brakes manually. And there's a little plug that goes in many brands of the parking brake chambers, and quite often that plug is missing. Oh. And I think all that road de-icing chemicals get in there.
Corrosion,
and,
gotcha.
And corrosion. That's one of my favorite things. So, yeah, so I think that's what it is. But it's something we had to look for, and sometimes we'd bring a trailer in, and out of 4 parking brakes, we might have to change 2 of them, and then of course we take a hard look as best as we could at the other 2. And then the other thing, I guess, why we're talking about parking brake assemblies. So you could do what you call a piggyback repair, which you leave the base and the push rod on your vehicle, and you replace just the top half of that. So there's 2 diaphragms in there, and in the spring assembly, that big spring assembly we've been speaking of. And I find in the Northeast, if you don't change the whole assembly when you're changing the parking brake, within another 2 years, that part that you left on the vehicle is going to corrode and rot right through. So it's like in my fleet, it was always mandatory. We didn't change what they call piggybacks. We would change the whole parking brake assembly, which is a lot more work. You really need to be you need to know what you're doing there. So you cut your brake rod the right length, so you have the proper stroke on your slack adjuster. So a little more work, but again, you want to be proactive or reactive. Or do the repair once or twice.
So the trifecta when it comes to CVSA International Road Check inspections, it's brakes, tires, and lighting. We haven't talked about lighting, but that's also on the scary list, isn't it?
Yeah. So, well, a couple of things here. That headlights that are, I call it corrosion. It's like the plastic outer shell of the headlight is turned yellow. So you have dim lights. You've lost your lumens that light was producing. So that's a big problem, and there are kits that you could buff those out and or replace, and but also just poor lighting, dim lighting, bad grounds, high resistance, that type of thing. Always use a multimeter at the connections to check for electrical problems, and never stick a probe in through a wire somewhere in between. Either you have power at both ends of your harness. You don't need to stick that harness every 3 inches to see if there's power every 3 inches. So, because you just can have a corrosion issue. I run into that on a project the other day where somebody's used a test probe to check power on a wire, and I was thankful I was able to find that in a timely fashion on a project I was working on.
We've got about a minute and a half left. We got time for one more item. What do you got?
Suspension and steering issues. All those they're not as prevalent as they used to be, but there's so many things you need to do on your suspension when you get a new vehicle or you're replacing component like springs and that type of thing. You need to properly torque your U-bolts and not just tighten them with an air gun or a hand ratchet. You need to use a torque wrench, and you need to stretch that bolt properly and seat it to the proper torque specification.
Too much is going to ruin the threads because it's going to stretch it beyond its limits, and then too little, of course, is going to be loose and it's going to come off down the road. So you got to do it right, and you got to do it with a torque wrench. Absolutely. Well, we're just about out of time.
You should almost have a. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's okay. The one thing that's really scary is the clock, and we've run out of time for this segment. We could probably talk for another half hour about this stuff, and we're going to have you back again. Maybe we'll talk about some of these things a little bit later on in the year. But for now, we're going to have to say goodbye, and I'm going to have to turn it back over to the studios and Jimmy Mack in New Orleans.
Tell you, Robert, it seems like the scariest thing that's actually happening on the highway is people simply not doing the simple preventative steps they could take to prevent a lot of really worse stuff down the road. I got to tell you, it was the scariest discussion I've ever heard of preventative maintenance in my life. And so people really got to just do that pre-trip and keep on top of all the stuff before it actually gets on top of them is basically the takeaway from that for me.
Absolutely. You're spot on.
By the way, you got big plans for Halloween?
No, not really. Kids are grown and all that stuff. We'll just keep the trick-or-treaters at bay. That's about it.
That's about it. I'm actually going to the 50th anniversary of the Rocky Horror Show at the Mahalia Jackson Theater.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love that movie. That's great.
Have the happiest of Halloweens, Robert. We'll talk at you next time on Maintenance Matters. Thank you, sir.